Hello everyone, my name's Z. You may have not seen me before. I am the producer of the Lavender Laboratory. Today we are back with another domain dissection. Now, today we are going to be taking a look at a deck submitted by a very good friend of ours, Draco Eyes from the domain server. Feel free to check that out in the description. And today we are going to be talking about their Group Hug SLIFER deck featuring 2-for-1 team. Now, this card is a level 2 Light Warrior with a pretty cool effect, or set of effects, you might say. Once per turn, you can make both players, key that changes in domain, show one card from their hand, and if both shown cards of the same type, apply an effect. They're both monsters, special summon each of them to their owner's field. Spell, each player draws 2, and trap, each player mills 2. Now you can have a lot of fun with this using domain politics, which in short is basically kind of like commander politics, where you can team up on people or team up to avoid getting killed. The idea of this deck is to last for a very long time, get a bunch of advantage, and then drop SLIFER on the last remaining opponent while they take each other out beforehand. So, without further ado, we've got the deck master. Let's go check out this main deck. We have SLIFER the Sky Dragon, key endgame finisher, can get up to a lot of attack points, and that floodgate at the end is pretty nice. 1000 attack for each card in your hand. Heroic Challenger Morningstar. This is a special summon if you have a bunch of warriors, of which almost this entire deck is warriors. You can only see there's a few monsters, but we make a lot of use of them. Next, we have an Infernal Noble Knight Renaud. Now, this one can summon itself if you have a fire warrior, of which we don't have that many of, if any at all, but this can search out equip spells, of which we have a very powerful one in Premature Burial. This card, as you may know, is unlimited in domain, but limited to 1 because it is a commander format, and yet there is no ban list at all. Next, we have a Magician of Faith. This works because of the light, and you can recycle your spells this way. This keeps a lot of advantage going. A lot of these very good power spells like Hand Destruction, Premature Burial again, Pot of Greed, classic GOAT plays. Next, we have an Enter Machina Carnord. This card is really good in domain because it shuffles itself back into your deck so you can reuse it again, and it's during a duel that your opponent has activated a monster effect in hand or graveyard. When you've got 3 opponents, that is bound to happen no matter who you are playing. This is a great card for bringing out a giant beat stick. Next, we have a card I've actually never seen before, Mourning Bourgeoise, the Dark Ruler of the Highest Heaven. I butchered that name to the sun. You can special summon this card from your hand by banishing 3 cards from your graveyard, a monster, a spell, and a trap. And if it's special summoned, you can banish a monster and 2 spell traps from your opponent's field and graveyard. Oh, Lord of the Missing Barrows, that's a much easier name to think about. So, this card is another great boss for late in the game. That's the thing, this deck is about late game killing, and you can do a lot of that with these big beat sticks. Next, we have Thunder King the Lightning Strike Kaiju, because getting rid of problematic strike monsters is something this deck can really use. Thunder King is one of 2 kaijus that fit under this, and we are using Thunder King, I suppose just because Draco felt like it. You've also got the, Jizukiru as an option. Next, we have Santa Claus, another kaiju that is definitely weaker. It is a light fiend, calling all Fiendsmith players, and it summons in defense position by tributing a monster. It also has that maintenance cost at the end of the turn to draw a card for the opponent. Now, that doesn't always come up because it's probably going to get beat over by battle, but it's definitely weaker than the alternative kaijus. Next, we have a Joker's Knight. We're playing a whole poker package. We have Jack's Knight, King's Knight, Queen's Knight, and a couple of the backer. We've got a Joker's Wild and a Joker's Straight. Oddly enough, 2 cards for making one of them work is more consistent than you'd think in a domain deck, and in a deck where you really don't want to draw into bricks, but you also have 60 cards to avoid drawing into bricks, that can come in handy. And this gives you a lot of bodies, particularly warrior bodies, which can come up later and you'll see why. We have an Arcana Triumph Joker to play alongside our Thunderspeed summon, which can also search SLIFER the Sky Dragon. This card's kind of a mini SLIFER, if you will. You can make decent use of it, and it has an Invoked Macabre type destruction effect. Yes, I know Invoked Macabre is negate, but you get my point. Next, we have Magicians of Bond and Unity. This card's hilarious because it can actually come up. You're playing a lot of cards that just go to the graveyard. It's tons upon tons of spell cards. So you can bring out this card fairly easily, and if it's late into the game, once again, late game beater, you can have a 5,000 attack spellcaster. We have an effect veiler because easy hand trap, it is a light. Moving on, we have Raigeki, Snatch Steal, Chicken Game. All of those are good cards. Way Where There's a Will is a card you may never have even seen before. During the main phase, the turn player can activate this effect, activate cards from the top of your deck, up to the number of cards your opponent controls, add one of them to your hand. Also, place any remaining cards and one card from your hand on the bottom of the deck in any order. It's kind of like Pot of Duality in a sense, with less restrictions, but it's a little bit hard to use because of your opponent. That's a lot easier in Domain. During the end phase of any turn, a player activates 9 or more cards at once. That player can activate this effect, shuffle all cards your opponent controls and in their graveyard into the deck. You can target an opponent to do this too, which is really cool. Next we have Extra Net. This card is kind of a mini Max C for decks that can't play Max C, aka Earth or Insect decks. But here, it is able to summon from 3 separate people. And every opponent, I believe that any opponent can use this, but it's very interesting to see in a Domain setting. Lots of draws for that SLIFER. Next we have Cup of Ace, which is a very funny one. You can target an opponent, make a deal with them. If heads, you get the benefit, and if tails, your partner gets the benefit. We have Double or Nothing for a Utopia double package. Wasn't what I was expecting, but I am very happy to see it. Easy, quick OTKs. Next we have Triple Tactics Thrust, which is a very good card in general, and you can make good use of it if your opponent activates monster effects. And this is Modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Of course they're going to activate monster effects on your turn. Next we have Top Share, which is thematically correct as the features are 2 for 1 team, but it's also a very good way to make more deals. You can see a whole theme forming around here. It's ways to make deals with people to stack their deck in exchange for stacking yours. You have Gift Exchange, which is also a way to make deals. You can each banish a card from your deck and give them to your opponent. One of them goes to you. Margin Trading is also an interesting card that you can use. Both players look at their opponent's deck, choose a card, add that card from their deck to their opponent's hand. So it's kind of another similar thing to Top Share, except a little faster and negatable. Next we have Exchange, which allows you to exchange a card in each player's hand, but you get to choose it, so you can do it on someone you don't like to. Foolish Burial, Painful Choice, Monster Reborn, Monster Reincarnation, Feathered Phoenix for recycling. The Legend of Tickets is a very Domain card. It allows you to target a card in your graveyard, place it on top of the deck, recycling, and draw 2 instead of 1 for your next turn, so you effectively stack your deck with a card you've already used. Graceful Charity, Hand Destruction, Heavy Storm, Feather Duster, Giant Trunade, Infinite Cards. This is for the SLIFER stuff because you can see we do a lot of drawing. We have a Joker Straight for the package I mentioned earlier, Pot of Greed, Premature Burial, Spell Card Soul Exchange. This is very similar to regular Soul Exchange. You contribute summon cards like Kaijus, you contribute for a Jack's Knight or an Arcana Triumph Joker depending on the situation. And it is fairly useful in a couple of situations. Thunderspeed Summon is also interesting because you don't actually have to have Queens, Kings, and Jack's Knight on the field to use its normal summon effect. As long as you have Enigmatica Carnor, SLIFER the Sky Dragon, or Arcana Triumph Joker, I don't believe you can use this one very well with that though. You can use Thunderspeed Summon. Next we have One Day of Peace and Prohibition. Prohibition is really good. I'm not sure how this works with Deck Masters, but I do know that it is very targeting and very useful for making deals. Appropriate. When your opponent draws a card outside of the draw phase, you can activate it, and each time your opponent draws a card out of the draw phase, you draw another 2. This card's very good for deep drawing, and very good in a deck with infinite cards. We have Pinpoint Dash. If you have never seen this card, then oh boy, you are missing out. Pinpoint Dash. Each player reveals a face-down card from their next deck. If they're the same type, Fusion, Synchro, Caesar, Link. Send it to your opponent's card to the graveyard, then special summon your own. Then, if they have the same type and attribute, your opponent takes damage. Otherwise, you send yours to the graveyard, and your opponent special summons theirs. You can give a teammate air quotes, a strong monster to use, or you can summon one of your own. And you've got Kaijus to get rid of the opponents. We have Heroic Gift, which is also an interesting one for deal making and for just in general drawing more cards. If your opponent's life points are 2,000 or less, make their life points 8,000 and draw 2 cards. That's a really bad effect in normal Yu-Gi-Oh! Because if they're low, you might as well just win, but you've got 2 other players to think about. Next we have Joker's Wild for the Joker Straight for the Poker Knights I mentioned before. Side effects. your opponent draws 1 to 3 cards, then you gain a ton of life points for it, so more deal making and more draws. The Revived Sky God, which can revive SLIFER the Sky Dragon, and it can search that monster reborn, which is really, really nice. Or stack it in worst case scenario. Trap Tracks can grab you these power trap cards. Mind Crush is a very targeting card. You can do it off of searches, and it gives you some political power. Next we have Infinite Impermanence, good card. Needle Sealing, good card. Torrential Tribute, good card. Finally, You're Finished, which is Nibiru for monster effects. If 10 or more cards or effects have been activated during this turn, special summon this card as an effect monster, but set it in your spell and trap zone during your end phase. Once per turn, when your opponent activates a card or effect, you can destroy, while it's in the monster zone, you can destroy as many cards your opponent controls as possible, then set this card in your spell and trap zone. So this is very, very annoying to deal with, and when you've got 4 people throwing effects at the wall every turn, you very well could activate this a lot easier than you'd think, especially compared to modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Sales Pitch. If your opponent adds a card from their deck to their hand except by drawing it, reveal 1 card from your deck and add it to your hand, but you can't activate it for the rest of this turn. This card is really nice in Domain because things are a little bit slower, just slow enough where a card like this works. Finally, we have Mythical Bestiamorph. Each time an opponent's monster activates an effect, place 1 spell counter on this card. When it resolves, you can send it with 6 or more spell counters to the graveyard to search a spell. And if you are looking at this deck, we have a lot of very, very good spells. Things like Legend of Tickets, Graceful Charity, all of them at your disposal after 6 monster effects. That's period from your opponents, because you've got 3 of them. Elder Entity Natis is an interesting summon off of Pinpoint Dash. So is Ciphering Lord Omega. That's the only reason why we're really playing these. Other than, I don't believe we do have 1 Synchro, but we certainly can make Natis. Heroic Champion Clave Salish is 2 level 4 warriors and has fairly decent OTK potential. You just have to give up your life points for it, but that doesn't matter if you win against your last opponent. I mentioned the Utopia double package earlier. We also have Utopia the Lightning for use there. And then we have Evil Swarm Exciton Knife, which is a light rank 4 that can wipe a board, which in general is very, very good. We have Divine Arsenal AA Zeus. That's right, we can play this card. This card is very strong and I believe wipes all 4 fields. If my rulings are correct, I could be a little mixed up. But it's very good. It's very good in Domain, it's very good in TCG. There's not really much to say about it. You can rank it up on top of any of these guys, assuming they survive. Isolde Two Tails of Noble Knights is a warrior-specific link. Luckily, most of our deck is warriors, and so we can pair that with an Equip Spell and Renaud to instantly search an Equip Spell from our deck. Arcana Extra Joker is another way to make use of our Poker Knights. This one is a lot more like Invoked Makaba, a little bit worse, but it's also a 2800 link 3 we can just fire off if we really need to. BLS is in a similar vein of being a big beatstick link 3 that we can make use of, and especially if we use something like Enter Machina Carnord, we can get extra protection. We have Line of the Light Charmer in case we're going up against another set of light decks. We have Top Hat Pair, the Silhouette Magician. That can set us our You're Finished, which is very, very good. And SP Little Knight, because obviously, and it's a warrior, which is really, really cool. We can use one of our Links or Excesis for it, which is pretty neat, especially with that lineup right there. However, even if we can't do that, it's still, a fairly good card. We can tag it out with something on most turns. Underworld Gods of the Closed World is our last piece of removal and our last card in the deck. If you've never seen this card, I highly suggest looking it up because it is incredibly useful at outing Towers monsters, and as someone who plays Super Quants, I despise it. Anyway, it is a Light Fiend, 3000 attack, link 5, and you can use one of your opponent's monsters as link material to make it, which is really, really cool. This deck has a lot of politics to it. You can make use of a lot of these back row like side effects or heroic gift to give your opponents extra grounds to slap each other and avoid hitting you. Because if you're down to 1 opponent, you can drop a 10,000 attack SLIFER and blow them up with lightning, which is really, really cool, and very, very proud of Draco for making such an amazing deck, and thank you for submitting it. So, with that being said, my name's V. Glad to see you around here. Have a good night.